Hello, lovely, wonderful humans. Welcome back to my channel. I'm FCA, and for today's video, I'm going to be riding the coattails of my aggressors in relationships videos. And so when we're talking about people who are in abusive relationships, I will call them aggressors for this video because YouTube seems to be a little testy about the other A word. But I want to, with Valentine's Day coming up, and I know some people could be very desperate for relationships, and I just don't want anyone to get hurt. So I have good intentions of just trying to display red flags for people and hopefully spare you just the pain of an aggressive relationship. I have a degree in psychology and biology, and my focus was in interpersonal relationships and sexual relationships, so that is my background in that. I did not get a degree in counseling. I do not have any certifications in counseling. I was in forest statistics. So that out of the way, just so I can have my little disclaimer out there. But we are going to talk about what happens when two aggressors date each other. I will link my other videos for more context, and I'll be referring to them throughout this video. So when people are aggressive or manipulative, toxic people in relationships, I mentioned that the main motivating factor behind it ultimately is control. How they get that control is different depending on the different types. There are sociopaths, there are different levels of psychopaths, there are people who just have neuroses and poor attachment styles, and then there are various forms of narcissism. A lot of the more toxic personalities in psychology are often referred to as the dark triad or triad, which is Machiavellianism, the narcissist, and the sociopath. And then some psychologists argue that it should be called the dark quad because of dark empaths, whereas other psychologists argue that dark empaths are just another form or type of narcissism. And this matters because how two aggressors in a relationship go at it depends on the type that they are. So for instance, a narcissist, if they are up against another narcissist, that relationship doesn't last very long. Somebody who's a sociopath, their relationships don't last very long to begin with. And then you have what is called the dark empath. The dark empath is has that controversy around it because dark empaths have a key feature of narcissism that's missing, is empathy. Narcissists do not have empathy for other people. They're able to feel sorry for themselves constantly, and that's why they act the way they do ultimately, is they have so many insecurities about themselves that they have to make everyone around them feel like losers to build their own ego, because they literally cannot handle anything coming down about them. But they won't go check themselves because it's never their fault, which is a common thing for people who are aggressors and toxic people in relationships. It's never their fault. They take no accountability. They think whatever is a means to an end for them, and that everyone else should just see it their way because there isn't any other way. Narcissists just do this with literally everything. Now, dark empaths, as the name implies, they are empaths. They are these special groups of people who are able to really pick up on other people's. They have that relatability, that ability to empathize and have sympathy. They know what other people are feeling. They pick up on their feelings and energies really well. They're able to read people amazingly well. But dark empaths use their power of empathy for evil. So that's where the controversy comes from, because narcissism means you don't have empathy. Dark empaths, their whole trait is being able to empathize, to twist, gaslight, and manipulate for their own needs and purposes. Since it's entirely about making them feel good about themselves by tormenting somebody else and relishing in making somebody else feel bad. But so some people say it's entirely different. Some people say it's a type of narcissism. You're allowed to argue that all you want. So what happens when just statistically, two people who are aggressors in a relationship are going to find each other? Either they're going to swipe right, they're going to meet up somewhere, kind of kick it off or whatever. So how do aggressive people get into a relationship to begin with? And the answer is the way they get into any kind of a relationship. they blatantly lie. They put on a falsehood of who they are, and they ask and try to use their tactics to get what they want from the other person, to learn about what the other person is, to learn how to manipulate and use them, or if they're even worth their time. Now, a narcissist, just generally speaking, there are different types, but in general, narcissists will end up being ultimately the victims of any of the other type of aggressors, because since they all have insecurities and weaknesses, but the narcissist is kind of obvious with stuff, the other dark empaths, sociopaths, and other forms of psychopaths will be able to pick up on that very easily, because that's what aggressors and manipulators in relationships do. They hone in on insecurities. So the more blatant your insecurity can be seen, that's what the others are going to dig into. Now, if two narcissists get together, this is going to be an interesting thing, because they're either going to end it right off at the first date, or they're going to be around each other for a short while. This is one of the shortest of the aggressive relationships, because if they intrigue each other enough, you're like, oh, because some narcissists will see another narcissist and, they're putting on their fake charm and all of their things, they're building themselves up. But if they see the other person's accomplishments, achievements, they look beautiful or handsome, whatever, if the narcissist sees the other narcissist as a means to an end, like, oh, they'll make me look good, this, I can have a partner who's worth bragging about, they'll be great arm candy, I can take credit, like, oh yeah, I was so supportive of them when they got this achievement, or I just knew they were a winner when I saw them. If the other person can make them look good, that they have somebody that they can brag about and somebody who they can use to make themselves look good, they'll be happy to take that person on, as long as that person continues to get to their means. Now, ultimately, these two are not going to last very long. Two narcissists together just don't last very long, because they're ultimately after the same thing. They both want all of the attention, they both want all the glory and all the credit. So since their goal is the exact same thing at the exact same time, and they're not going to give in to each other, because, you try to belittle me, I'm going to belittle you. And they know each other's tricks. They can see through each other. And so it's just a constant game of trying to top each other that they're both going to get tired of when they don't get what they want from the other person. And what they need from the other person is to feel like a loser, and narcissists don't like to feel like that. So they're just not going to be able to satisfy each other. So with manipulation tactics that they might use is, we mentioned before that there's isolation. Isolation is a big part of aggressive relationships, because they want you to be very codependent. They want all your love, support, and even financial means, needs, etc. to come from them and them alone. They don't want you to be going to friends and have a way out and someone else to talk to, etc. So a narcissist will tell another narcissist, oh, I don't like that person, or I don't like that you're talking to all these other guys. You need to just get rid of them. The other narcissist isn't going to do what they want and go, oh, okay, like they're used to. This person is going to go, oh, if you don't want me talking to this person, you can't talk to that person. Get rid of all the girls. Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything either, but you said I got to get rid of this, so you have to get rid of that. If you can't do that, then you'll see that you're the problem. And so that kind of back and forth, that's just an example of things that will happen, where they'll try manipulation and isolation tactics, but they're both doing it to each other. It's just a lot of arguing. Neither one of them are getting satisfied. And since neither one of them are getting what they want, which is all a narcissist wants is their way, it's just not going anywhere. Now, a dark empath, they kind of do the same thing with people. And the difference between how the narcissistic tendencies of a dark empath work different from a non-dark empath narcissist is in the camp of a narcissist, if their partner's going, oh, I just don't feel very attractive, I just kind of feel down about myself, I feel like I'm ugly. A narcissist, and pretty much any of the other aggressors, is going to say, just be completely dismissive of them. Just, oh, I don't care about how you look. You think I'm with you because of how you look? I don't care. Oh, you're so dramatic. Oh my God, shut up. Everything's not about you. Jeez. And it's that over and over and over again. Just complete dismissal. They don't care about your feelings. They're not going to make you feel better because you don't matter. Dark empath, on the other hand, because they feel what you're feeling, they understand what you need, they'll use that as their tactic. So where a narcissist will just be dismissive, they don't care about your needs, you don't matter, what about me? A dark empath will say something, they're more likely to say something with plausible deniability, okay? I almost said that word. So a narcissist will say one thing and then go, oh my gosh, you're crazy. I didn't mean it like that. They'll do severe gaslighting, blatant lying, word twisting. The dark empath is going to do those things in a much more subtle way because of the plausible deniability that they build into everything. So their partner, dark empath's partner, is, oh, I don't feel good about myself. I feel really ugly. The dark empath is going to say things more like, oh, you're not feeling good about yourself. Tell me why. Tell me more about that. Or, looks aren't everything, and I'm going to love you no matter what. I think you look good no matter what the rest of the world says, no matter what society says. I think you're great. But what makes you think that you're not great? And the dark empath is going to say things like that because, again, they'll be able to use that in the future if their partner ever goes, you always make me feel bad about myself. You took it that way. I intended it to be this. The dark empath is also, they lay low with their tactics because, as you notice from the way those sentences are kind of phrased, it's like they're suggesting that, yes, you are unattractive in idealistic beauty standards, or according to society, you are ugly. But they're doing that isolating, you're the only one who understands me. I don't care about that stuff. I see more of you. And what they're actually doing is making you intentionally feel bad, where they're like, yeah, you are ugly according to society, but I love you anyway. And oh, looks don't matter, because they're not saying you look good. You'll notice that they're not saying that you are beautiful or that you're beautiful to them. They're saying, yeah, you are ugly, but it's okay, to them, because they want to make you feel bad. They want to squeeze those words and those feelings that you have. Dark empaths take a great sadistic pleasure in seeing the sadness and tortured feelings of their partners and people around them. And they'll say things like that all the time. And then or they might do something nice like, oh, you're feeling sad. You didn't have closure with your mother. You know what? Let's go to your mother's grave so you can cry it out. They're taking a dark pleasure in seeing you be sad and tortured and tormented. And in your moment of grief, while you're crying and spilling your guts, they're going to take all of that in to be able to bring up later when they need to. And if you get into a fight with them in the future, the dark empath will be able to say, you remember that time that I took you to your mother's grave so that you could cry and have that closure, and now this one little thing comes up and you forget everything I did for you. And that way they can have something specific to latch onto. And narcissists, whether you believe dark empaths are a part of that or not, both of these people will only do good things to be able to change narrative later. Good people who just do good things for the goodness of their heart just do them. Narcissists, dark empaths, etc., they will do good things to be able to list it off later to guilt trip you, make you feel bad, and to change the narrative so that other people see their side. And now this matters because if two dark empaths meet, they just are going to get bored of each other because their feelings of dark empathy, they're going to try and get stuff out of the other person and try to be manipulative and tactical and say just the right things. But because they're both doing it, there's going to be just a stalemate, just a blockade, because they're not giving anything for the other person to use, but they're trying to use the same thing. So it's just, they just get bored very quickly, like, oh, this person doesn't feel. So how can I make them feel bad when they don't have feelings? Or at least of themselves. So they're just not going anywhere. Two dark empaths, because again, they pick up on each other's vibes. They're going to be very suspicious of each other very early on, because they're going to pick up on that that the other person has, and they're going to be able to see through the false charm very, very quickly. They don't want to deal, dark empaths are not going to want to deal with the drama of a Machiavellian. And they're also not going to be down with a sociopath, because since the sociopath, again, doesn't really feel anything, they just don't care. A dark empath isn't going to get any glee from that. So since they're not getting anything they want, they're meeting another just brick wall. That just relationship doesn't go anywhere. It fizzles out. First date done. Now, if they meet a narcissist, a dark empath and a narcissist, this is a little different. The narcissist will ultimately become the victim. And this is going to happen a lot of times if the narcissist is not with another narcissist. Because the others, the dark empath, will pick up on their weaknesses and insecurities. Like, kind of like thou doth protest too much is what comes to mind. Because they're going to be listening to the other person go on and on and on about themselves, boasting about their things. So they're going to pick up on that. Dark empaths are going to be able to go, huh, they're really talking about a lot of their sporting achievements, but they haven't mentioned anything about their academic achievements, or vice versa. Just, oh, how are your grades? And if the other person goes, oh, you have to have good grades to be good in sports. Well, not necessarily. If you're good enough in sports, you can get your grades fudged. So is that what happened with you? And they're poking and prodding. They want to find that sore spot. Because if the narcissist really didn't do well in school, they'd be like, listen, the narcissist will start to say things like, oh, listen, grades and the way the schooling system doesn't really matter. When you're smart, it doesn't always come out on grades. And they're trying to build themselves up like, you know what, I'm such a genius that, that they couldn't, like Albert Einstein failed math, all that kind of stuff. And the dark empath is going to be going, that thing about Albert Einstein has been proven to be false. That was just something to make people feel better who were bad at math. Is that what you're holding on to? And then there's a fight. And when there's a fight, the dark empath loves that because they got their way. They got bad feelings out of the other person. Because this other person, the narcissist, totally relies on their ego, the dark empath is going to be able to pop that ego in just the right times, giving them what they want, giving them that sense of control. Another thing that's going to be dependent on if the aggressors, as I mentioned before, the two main kind of aggressors is either they have very few bonds, outside bonds themselves, they keep away from other people, or they have a support system. Two people who have a support system are not going to work out because they're going to rely on their people to go against the other person. But since the other person has their posse to stick up for them, it just ultimately doesn't go anywhere. They don't come at each other because they both have people on their side. Now, the fascinating ones, because a lot of aggressive relationships, as you might imagine, they're very short-lived. They don't usually make it to a year when two aggressors get together, just because they're both constantly trying to get the upper hand. They're not getting what they want from each other. No one's satisfied. And the aggression in these relationships, because they all move fast, aggressors all move fast in relationships. So when they want to move in together, and unlike anyone else who might be hesitant because they both want that at first, like, yeah, we're moving in, we're doing this, and it goes very quickly. But two aggressors, they quickly escalate. It starts out with an argument. The argument turns into name calling. The name calling turns into hitting. And aggressors are not used to that. They're used to, once they get their way, that's it. But when they have another aggressor who hits back, they're like, and the brawling begins very early. So again, usually law enforcement, restraining order, people around them get them out of the way. These are the types of relationships that are very obvious to the public, believe it or not. Because a lot of times, aggressive relationships, they like that isolation. They don't want other people interfering. But because they're both participating, they're willing to go out there very quickly. The other person's not going to get humiliated because you called them a name in public. They're just going to come back at you. And this intrigues some people, some narcissists to sociopaths, sometimes a dark empath with a narcissist, etc. They will have this interesting thing where they're like, oh, you think that I've met my match? I'm going to show you. Because this person is at their level, they can go more all out. These are the type of relationships between aggressors. They usually don't last very long, not more than a year most of the time, usually less than 6 months, because of legal actions or just their personalities are clashing too much. They're not getting satisfied. Nobody's getting what they want. But sometimes these relationships, toxic relationships, last too freaking long and nobody else on the outside understands why. But here I am to tell you why. It's because these are the type, but sometimes these relationships last too freaking long and people will wonder why these two are even together. These are the couples in public that are easy to spot. Now, this is what happens with these couples. They are so passionate and fiery and dramatic and intense and over the top, whether it's two narcissists trying to top each other, a dark empath trying to get dramatic emotions, a sociopath just wanting to get their way, and any pairing of the two. What's going to happen is sometimes these two intrigue each other and they have one of those kind of relationships like you've seen in, there was an old music video from Rihanna and Eminem called Love the Way You Lie. The two actors in that, they are both the prime example, I will link it below, of two toxic, aggressive people who are over the top, who seem to stick together despite being terrible in and of themselves and to each other. And aggressors, here's another reason why aggressors might stay with each other, is because they cannot handle the failure of being dumped. The failure of a failed relationship, whatever time they've invested into this other person that they've clawed into or tried to claw into, they're jealous, they're possessive, they have a lot of that because they need to be literally the one and only for this person. They will stick with someone who they don't care about because aggressors only care about their own needs. There is no love, there is no connection, but there is fire, there is passion. And this translates to the bedroom. The primitive, animalistic, they get an amazing love life just because since they're both trying to top each other, be the best. And they're willing, and the other person can take it. Most of the time, with another aggressor, they're just as tough, just as resilient when it comes to things. And you know what? They're willing to hit when they get hit. So this makes for just the most unhealthy BDSM relationship because they're both willing to go crazy on each other. And that is a part of a thing that satisfies them because while emotionally and mentally they're not getting anything they want, sensually and physically might be a different story. Hence why you will often get these kind of couples who, as I said, they're easy to spot in public. Now, how so? And people around them question their relationship all the time. And they'll be like, oh, I don't know, there's just something about them. The something is their crazy love life that no one else can hit that sweet spot. So two narcissists constantly want their own thing. So since they're being selfish and they're trying to get the other person to give them what they want, and oh, I'm the best you ever had, because they're both trying to be the best the other person ever had, or if they're with a dark empath or whoever, the narcissist always wants to be the best. The dark empath wants to make you feel like you're the best so they can use it later, and sociopaths just want whatever they want in the moment. So when you have this going on, when you have that satisfaction in the bedroom happening, these two tend to stick together for the possession, for the isolation. The other person's dealing with them and not pulling away because the other person is trying to get what they want from them. So there's just this tug of war. Neither one of them are letting go, but neither one of them are winning. So how do you spot them in public? These are the people who are always arguing in public. They get way too loud, way too quickly. They really don't give an F about politeness, about manners, or about decorum whatsoever. They're both willing to do, you know what, you mother, blah, 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 and they're just going to go at each other. They don't care who's looking at them. In fact, if it's a narcissist, they might kind of like the attention, like, yeah, we're so raw. I'm so tough. Like, look at me standing up for myself. They like that attention. And because there might be a physicalness associated, depending on how far they've gone with each other, they might like start going at each other's throats and then mashing faces. And when they mash faces, they don't give an F who's watching. Some of them like that exhibitionism. So they are going crazy. Like, they're marking each other. They're both covered in bruises and hickeys. They're both biting each other's lips till they bleed. They're pulling hair aggressively so that it like pulls out. And they're both just doing it to each other over and over. And it's an amazing peak for them. And so they want more. That craving keeps coming for them. And as long as they keep getting that dopamine, as long as they keep getting that oxytocin from their brain, they're going to keep going back for more. And they're both willing to go through dangerous acts, illegal acts, because they don't care about the law. They don't care about consequences. A lot of psychopaths do not care about consequences until they're looking them in the face. Narcissists don't care about consequences because they're like, I shouldn't have any. I didn't do anything wrong. And even if they do something illegal, they're like, I got what I wanted. So stealing, whatever. Like I said, in that music video, Love the Way You Lie, the two actors in that, they originally get together. They're just kind of like, oh, you got something I want. And then they both steal from a liquor store and they're okay with that. It's one of those, when it's good, it's good. When it's bad things. When it's good, they're both relishing in the limelight of each other for two narcissists. Or a dark empath is getting all the vibes that make them feel good about themselves from the other person. And then when things are bad, it's just MMA fighting constantly each other. They're willing to throw things. They're willing to break things. They're willing to burn things. They keep trying to one-up each other in the most dangerous ways possible. These are often the couples who constantly are having the cops called on them for DV. They're the people who constantly have just list of DA charges. The cops are always there. The neighbors are always calling on them like they're arguing at 3 a.m. They're getting into a drunken rage in the middle of the night, etc. These are the people who are always mad at each other. If you have that friend, you know some of those people where you're just like, why are you two together? Because you hate each other. These are the people who you see where they're always texting angrily. And when they talk about their partner, it's never anything positive at all. Not even jokey. You're just like, oh, my partner is such an effing loser. Oh, if they're such a loser, why don't you leave them? Because they need me. No one else is going to love this loser. Narcissists, dark empaths, etc. Because they want the other person to suffer or to build themselves up. I'm just too good of a person to leave them. They argue with each other in public. It's intense, it's crazy, and it annoys literally everyone around them, but the aggressors do not care. Maybe one has like connections that the other person wants. Maybe it's financial stability. Sometimes it's just we have this thing in our brain where I've invested so much time into this person, it would be a sunk cost of all of my efforts and time if I let them leave now or if I leave now. Typically, these relationships usually just end in and you're not giving me what I want, you're a loser, name calling, or legal reasons is why these two end up splitting up. And other times, just like any other aggressive relationship, the physical altercations go too far and someone passes away. Because these couples are willing to go into very severe levels of physical in the bedroom, um, there is no safe word that gets established. They just go right into things like asphyxiation. I can talk. Um, or they start going into like needle play, knife play, and things that are very extreme without taking any of the necessary precautions for those kind of yums. And they just go too far, or they ignore the safe word, whoever gets into it, because there's two tops trying to top each other and it doesn't go well. Someone ends up severely hurt, and either the other person goes to jail or the other person just moves on with their life, depending on how that plays out. Sometimes the other person is just like, they just take the L. They got too severely hurt. And again, this is usually a mental dip on the narcissist whose insecurities have been, like, their shell gets broken ultimately, is why they leave. And it's just not good for anybody. It's not a healthy relationship. It's not a good relationship. There might be some good physical action happening from time to time, but for the most part, aggressors don't last very long. The ones that do end in tragedy. And some people think that these type of people deserve each other. They're like, you know what? If these two narcissists, dark empaths, etc., are together, they're leaving the actual innocent victims alone. But really, they could all use a dose of therapy and help, and maybe just living up that singlehood, learning to actually love themselves. But nothing's ever their fault. No matter what happens in the relationship, you know what? The other person effed up, not them. So when two aggressors get together, it doesn't end any differently than any other thing. Either legality or somebody's physical ending of life is what drives them apart. So that's what happens when two aggressors get together. I have some other like oddities of paraphilia, which I will explain more in another video. And so look out for these things. Not everybody who shows every little tendency or every little red flag is a narcissist. Please keep in mind that these things are rare and can only be diagnosed by a trained psychological physician. And the best way to kind of find out is if the other person apologizes, if the other person takes accountability, and if you when you bring something up, if the other person goes, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way, instead of saying, I'm sorry, you took it that way. Just ask the questions, and if you get a rock in the pit of your stomach where somebody's making you feel uncomfortable, that is a literal gut instinct, get away from them. Or see if they're willing to, maybe if you are interested in them, if you guys have seemed to be okay but something's off about them, see if they're open and willing to go to maybe a couples therapy. Because if somebody completely shuts down therapy and they're like, there's nothing wrong with me, there's obviously something wrong with you. The only thing wrong with you in that situation is that you're still with them. So keep yourself safe through whether you celebrate Valentine's Day or just any time of the year. Please keep yourself safe. Try not to diagnose people. See if you can get through things together. Every little argument doesn't mean that the other person is an aggressor. Just keep out an eye out for the red flags. You'll be okay. And again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, my lovely humans. Be safe.